73 people have been killed in a fire that broke out in a 5-story building in Marshalltown. That's in the Johannesburg CBD. Let's take you live now to Heidi Jokos, who is there. Heidi, more and more officials, government and different organizations, of course, arriving there. I understand you're with someone who was a former mayor of Joburg now.
Yes, we are indeed joined by Herman Mashaba, who is the leader of ActionSA, but also was the mayor of the City of Johannesburg and was very vocal about the state of the city, especially when it came to these hijacked buildings. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Mashaba. 73 people have passed away here and still counting. Of the 73, we've been told it's 12 children. A real tragedy, isn't it?
Well, it's actually more than tragic, Heidi, because this is something which was avoidable. I remember on the 1st of December 2016 when I first raised this issue of hijacked buildings. At the same time, I was sitting as a mayor of the City of Johannesburg with over 300,000 housing backlog. And when I raised this question that we cannot let people live under these conditions, let us expropriate these buildings in the event we cannot find the owners, give them to the private sector to build affordable accommodation for our people. But then, unfortunately, people with interest in these buildings unleashed insults, and including the ANC reporting me to the South African Human Rights Commission. Fortunately enough, I had the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa on my side, because what I was actually preaching and expressing at the time, it's in line with our Constitution. This was avoidable, but my sincere condolences to the victims and their families. This situation could have really been avoided, and let's really hope that this can really be a lesson to ensure that things like this do not really happen in the future.
I want to ask you, though, Mr. Mashaba, around the ownership of this building, because we had the mayor here today together with other officials from the city, and they've confirmed that this building is indeed owned by the city, but it's being leased out. But the issue here is, if a building is being leased out, surely you should check up on it. You were the mayor. What are these processes like? How do they allow these buildings to end up like this and become hijacked and have basically informal settlements inside a building?
You see, Heidi and your viewers, you see, if there's no political will, you can never really solve this problem. When you allow the so-called human rights lawyers and the people insult you and you give up, unfortunately you will have a situation like this. By the time I left the city, I'd already identified 600 buildings. I'm sure you're aware, 154 of them we had already awarded to the private sector to build affordable accommodation for our people. I had committed to give away at a minimum of 100 buildings to the private sector to build accommodation. I was not prepared to be sidetracked and diverted by these so-called human rights lawyers. I was determined to expropriate these buildings and ensure that we can provide affordable accommodation and safe places for our people. But then when you don't have political maturity, and you cannot take insults, you cannot take criticism. Unfortunately, this is what ends up in happening. If this building belonged to the city, there is absolutely no reason whatsoever why you should allow criticism to really stand in your way. And that's really what I found when I took over as the mayor of the City of Johannesburg. You needed to really have the courage to do what is right for your residents and your country.
So are you saying that the current administration in the City of Johannesburg is actively ignoring this problem?
Let me tell you, look at the 154 buildings passed in council to the value of 32 billion rand. I think about 3 or 4 of them I had already done the sort turning. People had spent money to really give us proposals. What happened? If I'm not wrong, only 1 or 2 buildings were constructed. The private sector lost money by giving proposals, which we took through council. A proper, transparent process was followed. But then, obviously, at the time in 2019, when the ANC and DA wanted me removed as a mayor because they said my focus from the DA side was I was focusing my energies on poor areas, and obviously ANC, I was fighting corruption. because unfortunately our politicians, senior politicians, are part of this syndicates responsible for this property hijackings.
Mr. Mashaba, you said that this incident could have been prevented. Now, the blame shifting has already started inside the city, saying, you know, the NGO was responsible for this, responsible for the building. But at the end of the day, the city is responsible for this building because they own this building. Would you say the city has blood on their hands after this incident?
Well, I think it depends, honestly. You can put the blame on the city, you can put the blame on the province, you can put the blame on our criminal justice system. I'm a living example of cases of criminality which our law enforcement agencies were refusing to prosecute. We had identified plus minus 600, over 600 buildings where we needed prosecution, because the City of Johannesburg, we run metro, so you don't have prosecutorial responsibility. I'm sure all of you as journalists are aware how many times I made statement to the effect that I really wish major cities like the City of Johannesburg must be given the right to prosecute, we must be given our own prisons. Unfortunately, this is a responsibility of national government. When you have a situation like this, where you have so-called human rights lawyers who will stop you from doing anything about this, you know the people behind this hijacking, you need prosecution. When the national government does not come to the party, the province does not come to the party. I'm sure all of you are aware how many times I requested Premier of the City of Johannesburg to assist me in dealing with this case. In fact, he went out calling me all sorts of names. The Premier at the time was also responsible. The ANC went to the Human Rights Commission to go and report me on what. Fortunate enough, when the Human Rights Commission investigated this matter, they said everything that I articulated and I said was within the laws of our country. So it's not just really that you can put the blame on the city. You are putting the entire country. We failed the 73 the people who died. And I can tell you, this is just a tip in an iceberg. I can tell you, if you want to see human rights violation, human trafficking go from one building to the other, you will never really believe. I don't know, as South Africans, how do we live in a country under constitutional democracy? How we sleep and say that we carry on drinking expensive wines and whiskey and expect that lives are normal. I'm afraid we are failed by national government because of the breakdown of the rule of law. If the City of Johannesburg is not going to get the support of national government, you can say whatever, nothing's going to happen. I remember on so many occasions where, on many occasions, for us as a city to conduct a raid, we needed to obviously get the permit, get the subs to accompany us. You know how many times the province refused to really give us that support? So what do? Now you end up not really being able to carry out the raid. When we will conduct information, we attack. Sometimes when they will accompany us, they would already tip the real people behind this particular matter. So for me, as far as I'm concerned, the national government, all of us people of South Africa, we must take the responsibility for this. Because when I raised it, I had no one to defend me when I was being called names and being insulted, that I hate poor people. Now this is it. This is a result of poor people not really having anyone standing up for them.
Mr. Mashaba, I just want to ask you one question in terms of the MNC of Public Safety was very defensive about the questions that we asked around the fact that there should be responsibility from the city given that they own this building, despite the fact that they claim they are leasing it out. And he's very adamant on the fact that the city is being sued and litigated by a number of NGOs for wanting to remove people out of these hijacked buildings. Was that also your experience when you were mayor?
No, absolutely. I mean, there's an NGO called SERI. I mean, they were the ones really very vocal. Every time I would even go to an extent of inviting them to some of the buildings where young children were being brought up in conditions totally deplorable. But they will say, no, you cannot really remove this, find them alternative accommodation. But he says, but do you expect human beings to live like this? Unfortunately, it is still the order, as I'm saying to you, and I challenge any one of you, go from one building to the other. If you want to see human trafficking, I can tell you this city, I don't know about other cities, I ran this city for 3 years and I conducted majority of the raids personally. At the time when the police, even Metro Police, were afraid to go into buildings, I would say, if you're not prepared to accompany me, I'm going to any buildings, because there's no building, when I'm the mayor of the City of Johannesburg, which is going to be a no-go area. And yes, unfortunately, when you don't have the political will, you don't believe in what you are fighting for, that's when you then allow the so-called human rights lawyers to really intimidate you.
But could that be the reason why the city is not really moving into these buildings? Because that was kind of the sense that the MEC was alluding to say, we have these programs underway, but it's very difficult to go through with them because of the litigation. Is it that difficult, for example, to come here and say, we need to evict you because this is a hijacked building, this is a danger, this is a hazard, there's human trafficking, it's a brothel, whatever it might be? Can that be part of the reason why the city at the moment is not moving into these buildings?
Yeah, well, they are not moving in, more especially the current government that's obviously now run by the ANC. So they have no reason whatsoever why they cannot get the support from province and national government. In my case, I had the province and national government working against me, you know, to ensure that I don't really succeed. But I fought. Eventually, people of South Africa woke up to the reality. Heidi, just to share something with you that I'm sure all of you are aware. I used to have very weird argument with the so-called human rights lawyers. I will tell them, majority of the buildings we used to raid, we used to find up to 80% of the people being undocumented foreign national. And then they'll argue with me that, you know, I'm talking nonsense. According to their stats, they've got 25, 26%. But now I'm saying 25, 26%, it's already a high number. I don't want to live in a country where there's one undocumented foreign national, because what these criminal syndicates are taking advantage of this undocumented foreign national. Going to some of the buildings we raided, we needed to actually have special, the subs had to really have special equipment to open the doors, because South Africa is a dumping place of expired counterfeit goods. They bring them into our country. That's when now they bring in human rights violation and human trafficking, where now they bring in young kids, especially girls. They close them into these buildings. We needed special equipment to open now. But obviously at the time, media in South Africa were still fast asleep. They bought into this narrative that Mashaba is xenophobic, doesn't like African people. And this city is not only hijacked by the people from Africa. We've got people from Bangladesh, Pakistan, people from all over the world. Actually, on the 22nd of October 2019, I went to present to Parliament a portfolio on Home Affairs, and actually remember one slide where I was telling them the City of Johannesburg is a welcome cup of crime. I indicated to them, giving them facts of people who were arresting in the City of Johannesburg coming from all over the world. So they are using an excuse to divert attention that when you raise this matter, it says, no, it's about Africans. This city is hijacked by international crime syndicates.
Okay, thank you so much for your time, Mr. Mashaba. We really do appreciate it. That is, of course, the leader of ActionSA and the former mayor of the City of Johannesburg, Mashaba.